So it is 2024, September the 25th, is it? 27th of September 2024. There's a lot has happened in the last 20 years of your life, Paddy. And I suppose this video is going to be a little summary of those 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's been quite a journey. Would you like to, where would you like to start?
Like in ways, like it's 2024 and the work that has been happening in India and now in Africa is 20 years old. We started in 2004, but actually it was in the famine of 1984, which is 40 years ago, that I was an 11-year-old child. And I think it was the first time the world saw images of famine on the TV, like that it was so publicised. We had the Live Aid, we had that big event with Bob Geldof, and I remember looking at the TV screens, and I'll never forget it, looking at my mom, and I just said to her as a child saying, we must do something. And I remember Mom looking at me, she said, we must. I remember running down to my room to get and took all the money out of my little piggy bag to give to these children that I was seeing were literally starving to death. And somehow like that touched me so instantly without it, I think it touched my mother and it touched me. It didn't necessarily touch everybody different ways, but we were profoundly touched by it, myself and my mom. And I think what's extraordinary is exactly 20 years later, I found this child, Tisa, dying of malnutrition.
Can I just pause? You found, how did you get in the position to find this child whose name was Tisa, is it?
Tisa.
So how did that journey?
Well, I ended up in India. I'd been a monk for 2 years, a Buddhist monk in Thailand for 2 years. And when I left the monastery, I carried on. I went to India, and I'd been to India before, and I got lost in a slum area, and I just happened upon this child, and she was literally skin and bone, and
she was on the street.
She was on the street. Her family had been evicted from their little tin hut, corrugated iron little hut, because they couldn't afford to pay the meagre rent that was, and they were literally locked out of their hut. And I got lost in this slum area and came across this child, Tisa, which was skin and bone, and it was
was she still with her family?
She was still with her family, but she was dying of malnutrition, and that's really how the project started. And like to think that was exactly 20 years ago since I'd seen the images of famine in Ethiopia. So that's kind of really how it started. And I don't think, like someone said, like, how did I get the idea to do this work? And I think my response was, the idea was given to me. I don't think that I had any point to any idea, any concept, only, I suppose, empathy, really.
And you said this work. What do you mean by this work? If somebody was listening or looking in, what would you say to summarise this work? What is this work?
I think it's like this work is about it's about humanity. It's about people. I don't think we understand. I don't think we can imagine the suffering that many people in this world are experiencing, like the physical turmoil of life, of extreme poverty. And I suppose through the physical work that we're doing on the ground and the advocacy work now that I'm doing in the United Nations is really trying to highlight this.
So if I'm not mistaken, there's 3 pillars to this work. There's work that's happening in India, in Varanasi, which has been a huge piece of work. There's advocacy work, which is your chance to try and bring what you're experiencing on the ground to the decision makers in the United Nations. You're going to conferences, you're speaking for the people you've met, the teasers that you've met on the streets. You're trying to be a voice for them at these big meetings where decisions are made about feeding the hungry. Is that correct? That's the second pillar.
Yeah.
India, the United Nations, speaking up. And the third pillar then is Africa, which is the most recent piece of work.
Yeah.
So could you give somebody that would be listening a summary of what happens on the ground in India? What has, in a couple of minutes? I know it's to summarise 10 or 12 years in a couple of minutes is an impossibility, but just to give a flavour of what that work is actually like.
Yeah, like I think, originally we started off as a hospital, the Varanasi Children's
You started a hospital?
Yeah.
You actually started a hospital in India?
Yeah, well, like it was a private hospital that they had extra beds in it. And then when I found Tisa and brought her to this hospital, we decided to set up a project because he had extra beds. The private hospital had extra beds.
Okay.
So we incorporated the private hospital into kind of like almost like a public hospital for people who are severely malnourished.
And who didn't have money.
And who didn't have money.
So that was the point.
Yeah. So that was like the initial start of the project was this. And like our evolution has been extraordinary in that, and in many ways you think setting up a hospital is an amazing, powerful thing. And it is, and you think you couldn't do anything better than that. And at the time that's what we kind of thought, and that's what I thought. But we reached the point maybe 9 years ago that we realised that unless we start going to the community and stopping people, children becoming malnourished, that they're always just going to keep on coming into the hospital. So we made what I feel was a really brave decision to close down the hospital and to go out and start working in the communities. That was a brave decision because in many ways it would seem regressive. You're going to close a hospital
that was so hard to open and to build up and
to keep going, to go into the villages and provide very much more basic but direct interventions. And originally we did this with this product called Plumpy Nut Easy Paste, and so this was we give to children. Yeah, many people would have seen it in the ads, concern ads, for example.
This was a food product.
A food product for severely malnourished children.
So you closed down the hospital with this vision of going out to people rather than they having to come to you, and preventing them having to come because you were going to give them a high nutritionally dense food product to the children. To the children. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, from really listening to people and experiencing what it's like in the village and kind of listening to a lot of people, we kind of realised we actually needed to go a step further. So rather than giving this type of a product to children when they're already malnourished, we kind of realised, and I saw that these children that the problem is that the mothers themselves are malnourished. So they're pregnant and they're malnourished. So literally in the womb we realised like their babies were also malnourished and they were being born malnourished. So if we really wanted to stop the cycle, originally we went in the villages because we wanted to stop them, that they didn't need to come to the hospital. And then we realised, well, if we truly want to stop this cycle, we must begin with the mothers. So that's why in about 2014, after 10 years of work, we went from the Varanasi Children's Hospital to Mothers First.
So when you say you went from, you changed the name of the charity and the focus more particularly.
Yeah.
Have I got it right?
Yeah, we changed the focus of the project to mothers, and particularly to malnourished pregnant mothers. So what we do is and continue to do is once they fit our entry criteria for malnutrition, the mothers themselves, we give them food packets every month.
So they fit a certain criteria, and you establish this because you're trained as do you want to say?
Yeah, so obviously I've my training in nursing. I have a background in nursing, and but this is a kind of a standard protocol body mass index for measuring malnutrition, particularly during pregnancy. So we have a very strict criteria. But what's very interesting is that because that criteria can be summed down to, if you measure this is called MUAC. So if you measure their upper arm measurement, and if it falls below a certain level, it means that the mothers are clinically malnourished and they can come into the program. And what's extraordinary is that you know, this as an intervention has drastically reduced the amount of malnourished children that are in the community, because we're getting that malnutrition right at the start. And so typically our intervention would increase the baby's birth weight by about 200 to 250 grams. Now that doesn't seem an awful lot, but when you think these babies have been born 2.5 kg, and that extra bit of help, the differences that make. And we continue the intervention for 3 to 4 months after they deliver. That's so that the mothers can help them with the breastfeeding and help them establish good practices, and so that's in essence. So that's why we've named the project now the Mothers First.
And you keep records of all of this, or is it just kind of like, how do you know that there's this significant improvement? Or,
Yeah, no, I suppose one of the things, even though we're relatively, in the greater scheme of things, we're a relatively small project, maybe about 200 mothers every month are being fed in the program who are clinically malnourished. We've got maybe 20-25 babies every month that are born, but we're really methodical around collecting data, because we really want, and we're still trying to show how well this intervention has worked. So, because I think often the problem with a lot of the big organisations is that they go big too fast, and they don't really understand how a program works. They don't really listen to the benefit, to the people that we're trying to serve, to the community. What do they actually need? So I think one of the beauties about Mothers First is that we are that small, intimate project. We do really understand what works. We understand when it doesn't work, why it didn't work. Like for example, we did a survey, and it was like a blind survey, in that we didn't have any names of the mothers or who was answering the survey, but to see how much food that we were giving, they were consuming themselves, which is specifically for them, or they were giving to the rest of their family. Because you need to understand that, these are extremely poor communities. Food is a huge issue. So everybody's hungry in the family. And the mother's natural instinct is she wants to see all her children being fed. And so what we found was that after about a year, when we did this survey of running this program, what we found was that they were only consuming about half of the food that we were giving them, because the other half were being given to the rest of their children. But what we did then was we changed our approach and started educating the mothers really around, we're giving you this food, but it's actually not for you. It's going to benefit your unborn child. And this whole thing changed the concept completely of the mothers, because the mother's natural wish is to give to her children. So she would herself go hungry so that her children can eat. And I think any parent will really resonate with that. You prefer to see your child eating than yourself. But once the mothers realise that actually this is benefiting my baby that's so vulnerable, so it completely changed that dynamic. And I think that's, again, one of the beauties of our project is that we are that small, intimate kind of a project. We are able to kind of react and listen to the mothers like that and kind of like build on what they've said, their experience. And I think that's one of the things that, one of the things that's the beautiful aspects of the project. But I think it's also, like you mentioned there about the UN and my work in the UN, it's this intimate understanding of people and how we're working, bringing that to the United Nations, both on like an analytical point of view.
Because you have the statistics.
Because we have the statistics, but more also from the heart. It's like the UN is in many ways run by academics, but it's not run by the heart. And I think that's where...
And probably very well intentioned academics.
Absolutely, absolutely well.
But you bring that direct experience of holding the hand of a mother or a child dying.
Yeah.
And you represent that to the best of your ability to the people who have studied these things and have a lot of other experience. And maybe the ideal would be that would be a meeting of collaboration that brings the best forward, and that's the vision from here, I imagine, on the ground and the skills at the higher levels coming. Is that...
I think I really, very few people have seen what I have seen. I've seen children dying of hunger. The moment, I'll never, child Sonny, the first child that I'd seen that passed away in front of me because of malnutrition. And, this happens. And, in many ways, after this moment, there was no going back, because it's kind of like it opens up a space and a place that you kind of like, it's unimaginable. And for me, my work in the United Nations and as an advocate is drawing on this, because I've witnessed this. So when you
Can I ask you, Paddy, we're going to talk, and you are talking about your work in the United Nations, but can you tell us a little bit about Sonny? Because I remember you telling me about Sonny before, if you're comfortable to tell us about Sonny. Is that okay? Or to tell people who might be listening about Sonny?
Yeah, Sonny was, like I said, he was the first child that I had firstly seen, been present, who had passed away because of malnutrition. But Sonny's case was particular. Every case like this is really sad, but malnutrition, particularly when we were working at that level, when we were at the hospital, malnutrition is very severe. Malnutrition, you go through stages, particularly when you're very, very malnourished, and oftentimes the treatment can begin to seem to work, and you see them begin to come back, and you can begin to see their personality. But when they're so malnourished, the certain percentage of children will regress back again, because the organs are now beginning to almost revitalise again with the nutrition, and that can actually put them into organ failure. So what was so sad with Sonny, for me personally, is that I'd reached the point where we felt that he was getting better, and you could see his personality coming out, and you could see his smile, you could just kind of see, it's that inquisitiveness of life, that kind of like, when they're so malnourished, there's just, you just see it in their eyes, they're not interested in anything. Their whole idea of playfulness is gone. So with Sonny, this started to come back, and I began to imagine Sonny beginning to walk, beginning to speak, beginning to walk, and I allowed myself to see this happening, to vision this happening, and then suddenly he had some complications, and within quite quickly, within 18 hours, he started to go downhill, and then he passed away. I'll never forget it. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'd been up all night with him, and I went out to have a cigarette. I was smoking at the time, and then when I came back, the mother and father were just bawling, crying, and he just passed away.
Was Sonny blind?
No.
No, it was a different child.
Yeah.
What was the child's name? It was.
I forget.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay. And the other person I'd like you, if you're to talk about, so blessings on Sonny and his family.
Yeah,
and
like
blessings on the young guy that was you, whatever years ago, up with him all night.
Like there was an innocence for me as well. I was so innocent.
In what way?
Innocent, like you couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine this ever happening. To see this needless passing away. And so for me, in my innocent and child soul, to witness this was the most, I think the most profound moment of my life.
Really?
One of the most profound moments, because it went against everything that I was about. My instinct as a nurse was to help people. My instinct to work in natural instinct. My instinct when I saw, the famine in Ethiopia as an 11-year-old. The whole thing was naturally to help. And then to have this kind of my soul witness this, and I still, even when I think about Sonny, I still well up, it's like that. And I remember when Sonny died, I remember just got on my bicycle, and it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I jumped on my bicycle, and I just cycled as fast as I could through the city. And I was like, do you not realise what has just happened? A being, a child has died because of hunger. And I just kept on, just went as fast as I could. I was just like, and I cried for hours. I found a spot and I just cried for hours, because this, like at that moment, an innocent was lost. But what was to come was, in many ways it kind of like cemented my absolute lifelong conviction. And I know this is my work for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life, my work is Mothers First, my work is in the United Nations, my work is bringing this to the politicians, to the decision makers, bringing the heart. It's not the logic, it's not the data, it's the heart that we're missing.
Backed up by the logic, which you have,
backed up by
and
the
backed
logic.
up by the statistics. It's both, because I think from what you've told me, they need both. They need the statistics,
They need
of
both,
course they do.
But both, we need the heart, because
The hard
if
drive,
people, if people like, and it's the same here, like if people understood what I have seen, we would end extreme poverty. It's like if your neighbour was hungry, your natural instinct is to go and give them food. You couldn't comprehend this. And I suppose me and the work that I've done, all I've simply done is gone from the neighbour to the person in Africa or the person in India. Like it's the distance thing I have overcame.
Yeah, so I'd like to, before we go to Africa and touch more on United Nations, I feel it wouldn't be right to leave talking about India without talking about Rekha. Would you like to speak about Rekha?
Yeah, Rekha is, I first met, in many ways it's an extraordinary story, because in many ways the project started when I found this child, Tisa, dying of malnutrition. So in many ways,
who was alive and well today, and living, grew into a young woman, and you have photographs of her vibrant and alive. Yeah,
and an amazing recovery, And
thank goodness.
Thank goodness. And I think that.
But Rekha, anyway.
But the extraordinary thing was, before I started this work, I was volunteering in a government hospital for women that had been burnt by their husbands. It's called Dowry Burning. And what...
Do you want to say more on that? Just if somebody
Well,
doesn't know what that is.
Look, it's where if for the couple get married and there's a dowry.
A dowry is money that comes.
Yeah, money that the family of the woman, the bride, has to give to the family of the husband. So that's a dowry. And in Ireland we had a similar, it was common. In old Ireland it was common. And so if that dowry wasn't paid, so normally the dowry could be paid over a period of 1 or 2 or 3 years. And so if that dowry isn't being paid for whatever reason, there was and still is the husband would burn the wife, throw kerosene, throw oil on the wife and burn them. It's called a dowry burning. So I worked in this hospital as a volunteer nurse before I met Tisa, and before I started up the hospital I was doing this work. But one of the people that I had worked with and helped was this woman called Reka, an extraordinary...
You had helped her in the hospital?
In the hospital.
Because she was the recipient
because she
of
was,
this
yeah,
awful thing. Okay.
But it turned out that a month later, after me working with helping Reka, nursing Reka, the child that I'd found, Tisa, turned out to be Reka's niece. As extraordinary, you think like a city of 3 or 4 million people, and I get lost in a slum area, and it happens to be the niece of Reka, this woman that I had looked after. But the extraordinary thing then was that when we left the hospital, and with this idea of treating children in the community. And Reka, even though that she had no education, she had and has an amazing mind and capacity to kind of bring people, kind of build things, bring communities together and organise things. So Reka, when she heard what we were doing, organised herself, went around to many of the villages, organised the women in the villages, and set up a system for us to identify children that were severely malnourished that we could give this easy pace to. So she was, I would have always credited her with that. And this is someone who's had no education but a brilliant mind. And one of the things that I'm really, really proud of is that now, as Mothers First have evolved into a program that's targeting mothers, now Reka has gone back to school. She's learned to read and write. She can now do the computer. She's now managing the project. This is her first year. This is her first year managing the project. She's doing the monthly report. She's doing all the staffing. She's organising all the trips out to the villages and doing the accounts. So in many ways it's such an extraordinary piece of the journey that after 20 years now we have a woman that has been through so much, was born and had such a hard life running the project. And what's amazing is, for me, is she's experienced extreme poverty, extreme suffering. And, you can go two ways when you experience such suffering. You can either become very hard and hardened to the world, or you can become very soft and empathetic. And that's Reka's natural being, is empathy. So she wasn't hardened by her hard life, she was softened by it. And for me it's amazing to think that the project now is being run by Reka, by a woman, which is you know, particularly in places like India where women are so repressed, and Rekha would have been like a so-called low caste, for her to be running the project. Like I'll tell you one story about Rekha, which for me kind of typifies who Rekha is. We had a child in one of the villages, and she had been burnt badly. Her leg had been burnt. Boiling water had gone onto her leg, and she'd burnt her legs very badly. And for whatever reasons, the parents wouldn't take. It was a girl child, and the parents wouldn't take her to the hospital. And then after the second week, I could see that this was getting worse. And we was like, what were we going to do? You know, we need to... And then Rekha, there was a moment where Rekha went up to the child and the family and demanded that this child goes to the hospital. And look, India is a very difficult country, particularly for women. And there was a point in all of this conversation that she was surrounded by 5 or 6 men, and she was demanding that this child needed to go to the hospital because the burn was becoming infected. And there was one point, and that everybody was shouting. Rekha was shouting. There was 5 or 6 men. Now Rekha's a small woman, and I was going to intervene. And one of our other staff said, no, hold on, wait on. And Rekha, you know, like this Rekha, in the end, everyone was shouting, but in the end, Rekha was shouting from her heart. And that child went to the hospital. And I don't think anybody had seen anything like this. A woman surrounded by 5 or 6 men completely standing her ground, completely determined that this child needed to go to the hospital. And for me, that typified exactly what Rekha is. She is for the down and outs, for the poor and underprivileged, because she has experienced this. She's experienced such suffering. And like, for me to think now that the project in many ways have naturally handed over to Rekha. She's done an awful lot of work, educated herself, learned to read and write. But in many ways, even from the beginning, she was seen as the leader, even before she could read or write. And now she's stepped up to the plate. So like, that's one of the things that probably, if I look back on the 20 years of work, that's the thing that I'm so proud of. You know, I never wanted to be the white person coming in and, you know, doing all these things, helping people. I always saw my role as the facilitator. I always wanted to allow the project, whatever we were doing, to be run, to be visioned by the local people themselves, because they know what they want. And I always wanted to be in the background, observing.
And I'm aware that the project Mothers First in India was seen as a model of excellence, and other charities studied it to try and replicate the same level of quality. And I just feel it's important to recognise that as part of this looking over these 20 years. What I said is accurate.
I think it is accurate. The unfortunate thing, and I suppose one of the reasons why why advocacy is so important, which we'll get onto a little bit later, is that our project is replicable, but it's not. We're not funding projects like this.
We being
like the international community.
So maybe we can move to speaking a little more about the advocacy, as is the word that you use, and in a nutshell, what is the advocacy? What is this piece?
You know, for me, I think what the advocacy is bringing people's voice, the lived experience of extreme poverty, to to the political stage. You know, I'm not an academic. I'm not I see myself as a field worker. Nothing beyond that. I've witnessed, and so to bring this as a witness, you become their voice. You know, and I often think of Sonny. I often think of like the experiences. I'm bringing those experiences to.
So this on the ground looks like what? Like bringing it? Are you sending in emails, or are you phoning? What is if we were to observe your advocacy? What would we see? What would somebody, if you were to explain to somebody, what does it look like?
I think a lot. You know, you can see in the Mothers First website, we've an advocacy section, and in there, I'd be forever writing documents, presenting reports, on the decision-making process, where funding needs to go, how it needs to be targeted. We need to increase.
So you're actually going physically to these conferences, is that correct?
Yeah, like in 2 weeks' time now. I work a lot in the United Nations in Rome, FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. That's a lot of my work. Around, you know, bringing these lived experiences.
And what's it like, Paddy, to be there at these meetings, these conferences, with your lived experience of abject poverty and the exposure you've had? What's it like to try and represent that at these conferences? What's that? How can you share some of that with people?
I think it's very difficult, because in many ways maybe I'm seen as a little bit naive, you know, like that I'm coming from the ground, I'm coming from this place of empathy that is maybe shunned upon, I would say, a little bit shunned upon. We don't like to speak about these things, particularly at big conferences, particularly within the United Nations. We prefer to be much more clinical. That's the way the process. So I think I'm seen as probably naive, something of a dreamer. Like, I remember I had this conversation with an academic, and he said to me, he looked up at his books, he was a professor, he looked up at his library of books, and he said, "You'll never end extreme poverty." And I said to him, "Yes, we will end extreme poverty." You know, and for me, like, and I'm absolutely, personally, my vision is, and I've no doubt that it's going to be achieved, is I'm going to be the catalyst, and not because it's me, but because it absolutely has to happen. We're going to end extreme poverty. We're going to end hunger. And I've already, you know, made some gains within the international community, but it's been probably 12 years since we did the last interview like this. Now I would genuinely, in 12 years' time, if I haven't played a major part in ending extreme hunger, and I mean like ending it, I will be very disappointed. Like, this is happening, and I'm absolutely convinced.
You can see it. You can
I can see it.
Yeah.
I remember I went into a hut in we were in one of the villages in India, and this is like really started the advocacy. It was in 2013, and we'd set up we were going to the villages, and we arrived in one village, and one of the villagers said, "You need to come, there's somebody very sick in in the hut." And I just knew from his tone that this was serious. I just understood this was serious. And I went in to the hut. She showed me to the hut, and I went in. And what I saw was, like, still remains unbelievable to me, but I saw a mother and her 2 children literally dying of hunger, of malnutrition. But what was it was almost like I entered like another, like almost like deja vu. It's almost like, maybe not deja vu, but I was looking down on this scene as if it was a memory. And I was doing all the nursing stuff that I had to do to kind of, to bring them back. But all the time I was kind of witnessing this as a memory, as my memory, as something like, and I think, now, if there's such a thing as a past life, I'm convinced that I was somebody, maybe in Africa or maybe in Ireland in the famine, a child that died or was extremely hungry, malnourished, that when I saw the images of Ethiopia, I was naturally touched. There was no thought about it, and then when I saw this scene, I recognised this scene as being experienced by me, and I think that's...
I'd like you to tell us, you mentioned some of the success, and with what you just said as well, the profundity of what you just touched on, that scene, and did they come through? Did they survive?
Yeah, they did survive.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
I'd like, if you would, just to tell a little bit of the successes of the United Nations in a couple of sentences or two. Something that has given you hope, which is, it feels like it's a big door that you're trying to knock on in the United Nations, and that you're pounding on, and sometimes it opens a little bit and sometimes it's closed. Is that kind of an accurate metaphor?
Yeah, I think it is. I think the biggest success so far, and I say so far because I think there is success coming down the road, the next year or two, but it was actually in Ethiopia, and this was like, it's the United Nations, so it's the indicator. We were developing up, I was part of a team that were developing up the indicators for the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think everybody knows the Sustainable Development Goals.
Maybe not, but in its simplest form, indicators for sustainable...
Yeah, so it was like measuring, it's a way of measuring how are we measuring our success in the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay,
so how are we showing that we're achieving goals to improve mankind's well-being in the planet? Is that kind of it?
Yeah.
That people are healthier, not as many hungry or dying, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Pollution and all these. Yeah. These are the goals.
Yeah.
And indicators tell us if this is happening or not.
Yeah. So how we measure the success.
And that's happening at the United Nations.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So in Ethiopia it was the final meetings of a process that has been going on for 2 years. It was 2019, and we had no indicator for women, nutritional indicator for women for SDG 2.
Sustainable Development Goal number 2.
Yeah.
SDG 2. Okay.
And I remembered it was almost finished. We still had no indicator for women, and they were just about to end the meetings. And this was the final meetings after 2 years. And this was like a room full of all the countries in the world. And there's me, this little Irish man, at the back, trying to behind the scenes working, speaking with different countries, speaking with UNICEF and all of these, to try and I particularly wanted an indicator for women, a nutritional indicator for women. And so it was literally like the hammer was about to go down and end the meeting. We still hadn't got what we wanted.
Do they actually have a hammer?
Yeah, they actually have a hammer to like end the meeting.
It was so like, was it in the air like?
Well, like literally there was like, I think it went down twice, and it was the third time, and it was like literally 2 years of work and then. So what you have to do is you have to put up your placard to speak. And I'd never done this in all the 2 years, because all of my work was always around networking, different countries, seeing how they could propose something. And there's this like placard coming up, and I was like, and then thankfully they saw it before the gong went down. And I have absolutely no idea what I said. I really have no memory of it whatsoever, of what I said. But it closed the meeting, and then once the meeting was closed, we had to go away, the room was cleared, and then the decision makers had to come back. And the decision makers, we came back into the room after an hour, and the decision and what I spoke of, I don't remember what I said, but I know it was to get anemia as an indicator, anemia for women as an indicator. And it's there now. If you look,
anemia is about blood iron, and it's a health thing. So now that this can be monitored closely to ensure that women's health in poor countries is held at a better standard. Is that
so when it's an indicator, it means that we have to report on that. So it's like it's a reporting mechanism to see how well we're doing. So and that was probably like my biggest success, the biggest success so far, but there's more to come.
And I know, on that note, I'm going to move to Africa. And can you summarise that journey to a listener that hasn't a clue about tell us about your journey with Africa and where in Africa, because it's a continent.
I suppose naturally Africa, like I ended up in India because I ended up in India, but I suppose from the witnessing the scenes in Ethiopia as a child on television, Africa always had something strong for me, but I was never taken there, but I always wanted to work, it just never happened that I was focused in India. And then I just had this idea that I wanted to go out and create a theatre project in India, or in Africa, to try and, because one of the big things that I feel is an issue with the United Nations and also an issue with the developed world is that we don't have that emotional connection with extreme poverty, with the fact that this is people, human beings like us. And I very much believe that theatre in particular can transcend that border. So whereas I have witnessed this extreme poverty, I remember it was like 3 or 4 in the morning and I just had this idea, I want to go out to Africa and I want to create a theatre project and to listen to people's stories of extreme poverty and create a theatre piece around that and show it. And kind of that's what we did. And maybe Roisin might talk a little bit about so
20 minutes.
20 minutes left.
Yeah.
So I had this idea, and when you're given, I was given this idea from nowhere, and how to manifest this idea, but I could see every single piece of it in front of me within a second. I knew it was going to happen. And it didn't happen how I thought that it was going to happen. Completely not how I thought it was going to happen. Through various ideas, I ended up.
There was lots of challenges.
Lots of
things went wrong to make this happen.
Yeah.
You felt devastated by some of the things to try and get this to happen at different times. I remember conversations we had, and there was things completely turned upside down, and people left that had agreed to do help, and there was a lot of people there was a lot went wrong.
A lot went wrong.
And you were carrying this weight of this intention.
So in essence, we were supposed to go out with a team of probably 6 or 7 people and 5 or 6 people out in Somaliland. So we probably had a team of 12 people. So we went from a team of 12 people, and I always wanted to be like the observer. That is my best role, is standing back and watching and looking and observing and building upon that, But anyway, we went from 12 people to creating this theatre project to 2, me and this other person out in Somaliland. And
just to clarify, Somaliland is next to Somalia.
yeah, it's kind of...
It's the same country, or
it's the same country, similar to like Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland.
That's
So
right. I don't want to get to, so people understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had to completely change the approach of, instead of creating a theatre project, what we did was we listened to a community of people, 500 households, and living in this camp for internally displaced people who were literally living on, now their circumstance, this was 2 years ago, their circumstance is coming up now, getting better, but they were living on black tea and bread twice a day.
That was their diet.
That was their diet. They had nothing. And
they were living in...
just like little, not even shacks, like little tents that were covered, bits of timber and covered with cloth.
500 families.
500 families. But what we did was, so we pitched it to the United Nations and they gave us a tent. It was called a listening tent. It was a hospital tent.
This is a big
tent. And we pitched it that we wanted to listen to these communities' voices. And that's exactly what we did. We listened. So we had lines of people every day coming up and we listened, we recorded their experiences, we checked their malnutrition rates, we did interviews with them, we documented up everything. And this was supposed to be the end of the process. We're going to listen and we're going to create something from this. But through that listening process, and this was like deeply listening, what began to emerge was their ideas how they could improve their own situation. So, because and I think how it worked is because the community themselves realised and the people realised that we were genuinely listening. We weren't coming with these big ideas, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. We didn't have a big budget. We're just saying we're going to listen to you. And through that process of listening, turned out to be like, we've ended up starting a project in this camp because of what we've listened to, and they have themselves identified the solutions that are going to help them. Like, so, and we're still very small, but we started up a microloan scheme.
So that microloans scheme.
Yeah. So one of the things was they said they wanted to, and like this is so far removed from anything I would have ever done in India. In India, it's,
different focus.
Different focus. This was their focus, they could improve them. So they wanted to set up a little business. So for example, we set up a microloans because they wanted to run a chicken business. So we had 7 families buy maybe 10 chickens in a coop to set up a little business. And what's beautiful is that each month they're paying back that loan, and every about 4 to 5 months a new business is created with the money that from people within, like,
it passes on.
People within
they pay it back, so that money is available to another family and a new business. So it's like a domino effect, lighting one flame and then another flame. And is it literally like that? Yeah,
it is literally like that. And like this idea came from them. They said to us, the traditional midwife said, we need training. They wanted training from hospitals on how to better deliver the babies when there's complications, when there's issues. We were able to help them with that. Then they said, which is kind of happening right now, is I think because of the idea of the listening tent, they said the women said we need an area where a women's area, that we can deliver babies in it's called the birthing tent. So that's now happening. And I think so these is like some of the things that we're beginning to do. But for me, what's so powerful is that these are ideas that have come from them. I would have never thought of a birthing tent. I would have never thought of where they wanted to organise, the workers in the camp wanted to organise themselves as a union, so that anybody coming into camp doing any work, that they would be a union so that they could get employment from anybody coming in.
That the camp would be doing the work rather than people coming in. To do the same work that they could do. So the union keeps it kind of solidified or protected. Yeah, so they have first rights on work that they have first
rights. I would have never thought of this. Okay. This was their idea to set up a union, workers' union. And that's a very different approach to normally organisations come in and say we'll do this and this and this, or we have funding for this.
We tell you what you need, maybe a little bit. Is it the best will in the world? Yeah, like they'll say, this is what we have funding for. Okay. Whereas this model went and listened to them deeply and allowed them to tell us what they needed. And again, if I'm right, there was one lady who played a bit like Rekha in India. There was a woman who stood forward in different ways and was a key player. Yeah, so when the midwife said to us, we need training, and so we had found a hospital, so we went away and found a hospital that was willing to give. It was a maternity hospital in Hergate in the city, and they were willing to train one of these traditional midwives. Which was a huge thing in itself. A huge thing to be able to but they only wanted to bring one person at a time. So then I went back to the traditional midwives and I said, look, we have a place that they're willing to give the traditional midwife training, but it's only one to begin with. So you have to choose one. And what was extraordinary is everyone, all the midwives, and her name is Rakia. Everyone, someone said Rakia, this woman, and as soon as they mentioned her name, everyone said, yeah, she's the one. So she went and did the training, and now she's really leading. She's an honoraka. She's now leading the birthing tent. She's organising. The midwifery. Any child is born within the thing now because she's done the training. But what's amazing, and it's similar to Rekha in India. What drives her is, and she's had a very hard life. She's a refugee from Somalia. Both her parents were killed when she was very young. She witnessed this. She ended up leaving Somalia to Somaliland, became a refugee, had a very, very difficult life. But similar to Rekha, that hardship left her, with this empathy, with this desire to help others. And so it's kind of, it's very interesting. Rekha now is running the project in India, and Rakia is naturally this leader that's born out of compassion. You could just see, we have some interviews with her, and it's all about the community. It's all about how she can help and how she can serve. I'd like to ask you, and this is all, and I'm sure there's more. I know there's a toilet being installed at the moment, which is another huge thing, such a common, obviously, thing here in Western toilet. But now there's a toilet is another thing being installed in the camp. Really, it's so it must be hugely heartening for you to see these changes and all happening almost just by listening rather than by imposing or deciding what, you know. But I do want to ask you, Paddy, a bit about some of the things as well that you have done to raise awareness around Ireland, I suppose, particularly. Do you want to speak about some of the efforts you are making to highlight these experiences, these stories, these situations that you've got your finger on the pulse of, I suppose, that you're very close to, and you're trying to be a voice for these in the United Nations, as you have said, but also with maybe throughout the country or throughout the world. But start, you know, what are some of the things you have done?
Yeah, like,
or trying to do, or planning to do, or hoping to do?
You know, like, I've witnessed what I've witnessed. A few people have witnessed this, and fewer still have been able to act in the way I've been able to act. So I'm like, so for example, for the past, this is the 4th year now, I fast from 8 o'clock Sunday evening to Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. So 36 hours every week I fast in solidarity with the poor. And I don't make a big deal of it, it's just that this is the right for me, for myself, to acknowledge this issue. Something that I can do, and I envisage until we end extreme hunger, I'm going to continue to do this. But I'm also, like the past couple of years, 2 years I've ran the Dublin City Marathon barefoot. I'm going...
Sorry, can you say that again? You run the Dublin City Marathon?
Yeah, barefoot. Kind of, yeah.
Without nothing on your feet?
Yeah. Yeah, like...
Is that not a bit extreme, Paddy?
Yeah, it is extreme, but what I've seen is extreme. And in some way, and I don't know, you know, it doesn't get that much media attention, and that's why I'm doing it, for the media attention. Not for for what I'm doing, but what would drive somebody to run a marathon barefoot? It's not about me or Paddy, it's about the issue. And whereas we haven't been tremendously successful so far
in getting publicity,
I see it's same like the fasting. It's like, this is something that I can do and I need to do because of what I've witnessed. And I, you know, yeah, like, it's a powerful, you can witness this with your eyes, something, but you can also witness it in your soul and recognize it in your soul. And I think when your witnessing reaches that soul level, you'll do mad things. Like, you know, it doesn't seem extreme to me to run a marathon barefoot, because your soul just sees things differently.
Quite powerful what you just described, the effect, and that seeing is one thing, but as you say, so I'm going to move to another piece of this, if I may, Paddy, and you have some things here on the table, you have some books and you have different things. Do you want to speak to anything that's here? Do you want to lift it up and show it to camera, or what?
Maybe not, but I think one thing I would like to say, like I've been, look, when you put yourself out to the world, like, you know, I was considered a slow learner when I was young. I had meningitis when I was young. I didn't go to school till I was 6 or 7, and you know, I remember learning the alphabet when I was like 7 or 8, and my mother just and I didn't really learn the alphabet when I was 7. I was like A B C D E F G H I, you know, it was like I rhymed it off. I didn't really know it, but I remember my mother was over the moon that I could do this thing, but I really couldn't do it, and I struggled a lot in school. But you know, when you're open so much to the universe, like I've ended up writing these little books, which I would have
May I lift them up?
Yeah, like, I'm just saying, like, the universe is an extraordinary thing, that when you go beyond, you know, like, we're limited only by our own thoughts. Like, like, now I'm writing really quite high-level academic papers at the UN, I'm giving speeches, I'm doing whatever. So, you know, I suppose one point, yeah. So look, anything is possible. If you just said to me, anyway, anything is possible. But
So, yeah, like I know our time is nearly up,
mm,
and you just said something. Do you want to just say that sentence again?
what then? Anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
I absolutely 100% believe anything is possible. And I absolutely 100% believe that we will end extreme hunger and end extreme poverty. I have no doubt. There is no doubt in my mind that this is going to happen. There's no doubt. But and I suppose because our time is ending, an awful lot of people have brought us to where we are now, because ultimately you can say all you want and you can have these ideas to do these different things, but unless you have the finance behind it, to actually do something like to provide the food for the mothers in India, to build a birthing tent, to help organise the union, to do, money is ultimately, you need that to do anything. And it's very simple. It's like we have a lot of most of Mothers First, almost all of Mothers First donations now, the work we're doing, comes from individual monthly donations. An awful lot of people, including you, have a donation, have set up a standing order. We've got a lot of, just even if €5, standing order every month.
So you want to say, I think you're about to say a big thank you to all the people.
Absolutely, we could not do this without you. Everybody who has set up a standing order, they get an email every month to thank you but that is allowing us to work. And so do not underestimate the power of the thought, I can help, I can give €5, I can do something a little bit, because if enough people, and the key to ending extreme poverty is enough people firstly decide with me it's possible, and then you have to ask, okay, what can I do? It might be donating €5 every month. It might be organising a fundraiser. It might be speaking about Mothers First or organisations like Mothers First. It might be just giving yourself the space to think about people less privileged. So everyone can do something. And if everybody realises that, and that accumulation of either thoughts, goodwill, a donation, whatever it is, even a thought of a fairer world, something that everyone can do and will make a difference.
So, is there anything, we have about 3 minutes left in our recording time, that's a lot that we have. Is there anything fine? You've already said things that are just like universes within universes of work and actions, and I don't know if there's anything finally you'd like to say to finish in the last 2 minutes that we have on camera.
I suppose what I would say is that it's inside you. So we just have to decide. We can have a better and fairer world if we decide. One of the things that I have seen and observed is that the happiest people if you imagined all your friends and the people that you know, the happiest people are the ones that give to other people. We have this idea that it's this will make me happy, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to take that and that one. But the actuality is that the more giving we are to others, we ourselves are healed and become happy and content. So I suppose that the call to action is try and look a little bit beyond ourselves, and it's who can I help? With a smile, with whatever it is, a kind word, and observe in yourself how that makes you feel. And that is the key. If we understand that, everybody's searching for happiness. Everybody's but it's there with the person that needs help. your neighbour, the kind word, the smile. Not only are you helping the others, you will see that it transforms yourself as well. And you will see that through the experience, your own experience. So that's my final call.
Thank you, Paddy, for this interview. And all your work. Blessings on it all.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you.
Awesome.